Hello, my fellow Beach residents and voters. This is your at-large council member, John Moss, who also lives in the soon-to-be 9th district on the Virginia Beach City Council. I'm here to talk to you a little bit today about one of the most serious topics and jobs that the City Council does. It determines how much of your money we're going to take because no one volunteers to pay taxes or to pay fees. And I believe it is my job to make sure that we don't unnecessarily take a dime that is not needed and that the city's budget is as lean as your budget. As I noted in my introduction, today's discussion is about the proposed FY 2022-2023 budget. A budget proposal that I'm putting forth calls for a revenue neutral real estate tax rate of 91 cents. Now you're going to see a lot of other numbers mentioned, $1.01, 99 cents, and who knows, other numbers might come up. But here's what you want to remember, that the legal real estate tax rate by state law come July 1st is 91 cents, unless the city council publishes a notice in the paper at least 10 days prior to taking a vote where they have advertised a specific rate at the max end that they can increase the tax rate from. That state law allows the city council to increase the real estate tax rate, but that notice must state what the default rate is, which is 91 cents, how much it might go up to, which was advertised as $1.01 and some decimal points, and that would constitute a 10.3 cent increase or an 11.32% increase. That's a pretty steep increase. So if anyone tells you that we're just maintaining the current rate of 98.87 cents, that's incorrect, or we wouldn't have had published that notice in the newspaper. Now, the vice mayor has proffered a proposal for a 99-cent tax increase, excuse me, a 99-cent real estate tax rate, which represents this 8.66% real estate tax rate increase. So it is not maintaining the current rate. It takes an affirmative vote of majority of council to increase the rate from the default rate of 91 cents. Today, you're going to see the art of the possible. It is not what a majority of the peers on city council are selling as in your best interest. It's a revenue neutral real estate tax rate budget of 91 cents. It increases funding for city employee compensation by $11.25 million and pays the first year of the $28 million of bond referendum requirement with cash. It's the recommendation I'm making, and my recommendation matches with the public's feedback. Next. I don't think anyone has to be a stranger to know that an 8.66% real estate tax increase is just not within the absorption capability of all but the most well-off citizens. What more really needs to be said? This: tax relief, not tax rate increases, is the only sensible policy as we adopt next year's budget. Next. And an old borrowing a phrase from a famous movie, smart is as smart does. And a smart budget provides and allows residents to keep $69.8 billion that they otherwise would have to give to the city treasurer for real estate taxes. And smart is as smart does, given our current labor market issues and the needs of our own employees, invest an additional $11.2 million in employee compensation, all with a real estate tax rate of 91 cents. A revenue neutral real estate tax rate is simple and the smart way forward. Next. Someone might ask, well, where is that $11.25 million going? You can see on the slide where it goes. And with a 91 cent tax rate, we're not having to adopt, or I'm not having to propose that we adopt the council majority approach of robbing Peter, that's you, the taxpayer, with an 8.66% real estate tax increase to pay Paul, city employees. Such a pitting of taxpayers against city employees is not only unnecessary, it's not an action that the city council should take, in my opinion, when the needs of both stakeholders can be met with a 91 cent real estate tax rate. But the message is a message of choice by City Council. It's not a message of necessity. It's a choice driven by a failure of the majority of the council to do the very prioritizing of needs, forgetting wants that families are doing on a paycheck basis. Next. Now this provides a summary. You can look at this and say, well, what is the difference between the city manager's proposal and the what's known as the mayor and vice mayor's reconciliation proposal and the proposal by myself, Councilman Moss. I'm just providing the factual difference of the proposed budgets on the table. It's the top line, and there's more to everything than the top line. But you, the voters, have to decide who makes the more compelling case. Those deciding to make the case for tax increases, or myself, who's making the case for tax relief during the highest inflation in 40 years. I'm not going to read to you, and I'm not going to tell you what to think. I'm going to share with you the details of my recommended revenue neutral real estate tax rate of 91 cents, and you, the voters, will decide. Next. When anyone works and approaches any kind of a problem, you always have, you might call your first principles. And these were my first principles. They go back to the beginning of my discussion about what I was trying to achieve with this budget. One, to do my best to help both taxpayers and city employees. But for most part is a tax increase in the time of this really robs people of hope. It's making a bad situation worse. I have taken your feedback on board from your one-on-one conversations, your emails, and your phone calls. I understand my mission is to lighten your financial load and fuel rather than drain your hope for a more prosperous future. Next. We certainly have a good example at the state level. I'm inspired by Governor Youngkin's empathy for the burden of government on working families and seniors and his commitment to make government more affordable. As you look at those initiatives by the governor, there is no reason why your city council cannot rise to the level of delivering more affordable government and tax relief. I know I'm committed to that end. Next. The words stand on their own. We can implement a 91-cent tax rate for real estate. We just have to be making the right choices. We need to rise to the occasion. If I didn't think I was close to the mark of where the public is, if not a bullseye, I would not be making this representation. But 11 members of City Council should be able to match the initiatives in kind that the governor is doing at the state level, because the state and the city have both experienced the overperformance of revenues, but families haven't experienced the overperformance of their income. Next. This is what I've almost unanimously heard from taxpayers. Now, I do not know what my peers are hearing, but this is overwhelmingly what I'm hearing. And it's also represented in the emails that council has received at citycouncil@vbgov.com. Next. Employees are the other stakeholder that's important because they deliver the services. It's city employees, not buildings, not trucks, not organizational charts, but actually the people at the deck plate every day out there cleaning our sewers, fixing our water, keeping us safe, and taking us to the hospital or putting out a fire. So if I have misrepresented or not properly captured the feedback that city employees have provided at our 2 public hearings, I fully expect to hear from those city employees, and I will certainly make any adjustments. Next. Now, many people, and rightfully so, are too busy taking care of their own lives to read the details of the city's budget, but this represents what the city manager had recommended. He put $32.8 million into a reserve account for compensation of up to 7.5%. He didn't recommend a specific raise. He didn't recommend a specific compensation plan, but at the city council retreat, he did make his comments known of why he was against the adoption of the step plan and the consequences long-term of that. So this is just a recap of what he recommended, so you would have that in your mind as you listen to the rest of my budget proposal. Next. I noted earlier that we had 2 public hearings on April 20th and April 26th. And these were the major themes from the predominant stakeholders that attended and spoke at those public hearings. There is one thing that you don't see here that was spoken much about, was the $45 million of borrowing for resort site acquisition in the CIP. Council wisely eliminated all the acquisitions in the possible exploratory phase, except the 17th Street property, which is ready to go to acquisition. The council majority has added in $12 million of price growth in the larger dome site development. There is $4 million attributed to an underground corridor for utilities for Atlantic Park. Think of the wave, the hotel, the retail. And an $8 million price increase in the taxpayer-funded music hall due to inflation impact on materials. This cost increase, if any, for additional sound attenuation is not yet accounted for. That is significant growth from its original price of $35 million, of which $5 million came from Live Nation and $30 million from taxpayers. The $12 million in additional borrowing is not in my CIP. I do fully support the acquisition of the 17th Street property for additional public open space at the oceanfront. Next. I would like, this is hard to read, so I'm going to read this because this is probably the most revealing and insightful and kind of like just says it all about what a tax increase is being proposed either at $1 or 99 cents. And this was received by City Council on April 26th. And it was from Amanda. I'm withholding her last name. And it reads, "Dear council members, I'm writing to let you know I'm not in favor of the proposed increase in real estate taxes. This proposed tax increase will ruin working families and elderly individuals on a fixed income. The city needs to find ways to help its citizens instead of trying to fund new fancy projects. I want to give you the perspective of a working family of 5 who lives in Virginia Beach. Here is a little background about me and my family. We have 3 children, ages 5, 3, and 7 months. I drive a 2011 used SUV, and my husband drives a 2007 used Honda Civic with over 200,000 miles. We purchased an 1,850 square foot home in 2018 and paid $300,000 for it. We both work full-time jobs. I'm in my 7th year as a teacher, and my husband is going on 20 years working for a neighboring county. Together, we make around $90,000 before taxes. This should be a livable wage for us, but it isn't. Due to tax increases from last year, my payment went up $59 monthly this year, and the city wants more. Not only did the tax increase, everything I purchase in my daily life has increased. My grocery bill, which was around $100 to $110 per week, is now $160 to $170 per week. Gas prices to get to work have increased, and utilities have increased. In addition, I work a part-time job for additional income, and my husband works side work for additional income, and we are barely affording the, quote, lavish lifestyle, quote, we are living, and the city wants more. We made informed choices about what we could afford. We put a small amount away in every paycheck and do all the right things. And yet here we are struggling to maintain. I can't cut back anymore. I already purchased the store brand essentials. I use cash back opportunities. I use coupons, buy in bulk when I'm able to. My kid deserves to have birthday parties, holiday presents, and all the things that come along with being a child, but soon we will have to dip into those funds in order to maintain. I know this is breaking away from her note. Certainly the city's not making those types of choices. Back to her note. To further my point about the crunch on working families, here's a fun fact. I couldn't afford to throw my child a park birthday at one of our gorgeous city parks. the rising cost of the basic party items for 6 kids and their parents, including food and drink, basic entertainment, bubbles and chalk, a small craft for kids, and decorations added up to around $165. This does not include a birthday present from mom and dad. To rent a shelter at one of the parks, depending on half day versus full day, can run between $70 to $140 for a resident. A small child's birthday would have cost a little more than $300 for the basics. I bring this to your attention because these are the choices your working families are making daily. We ourselves are robbing Peter to pay Paul. I beg you to vote no to increase real estate taxes. Thank you for your attention to this matter, Amanda. And that is representative of countless emails and conversations I have had, and I don't understand why my fellow peers are either tone deaf, indifferent, or just don't have a grasp on the struggles that our families are having in Virginia Beach. A grasp that certainly the governor has, and he's much higher up the food chain. To vote against her plea communicates more about the voting council members so voting than about Amanda. It is Amanda and her family, however, that will pay the price of council's tone deafness, of the additional pain being inflicted on working families and seniors by even a 99-cent tax increase. Next. Nothing here is new to voters. Nothing. They experience it every time they go to the grocery store. They pay an electric bill. They do anything. Today, I conducted our family's bi-weekly grocery shopping, and the majority of the purchased items were up 10% from 2 weeks ago. And you could hear multiple conversations of people about how could things go up that much in such a short period of time, or what they no longer can afford to buy. So certainly it's the consensus of shoppers, and certainly from Amanda's note, that groceries are up much more than the 10% the federal government communicates, but they're closer to 30 to 40%, and their pay hasn't gone up to 30 to 40%. What is new is the question of why a majority of council members are apparently recommending an 8.66% real estate tax increase in the face of the real inflation Beach residents are experiencing, and the real hard choices among needs forgetting wants that they're having to make a choice on. Furthermore, almost all reputable financial analysts are projecting food inflation to get much worse over the coming months leading up to and after Election Day. The City Council certainly cannot mitigate all those effects, but we don't need to add to the pain. And that's what anything more than 91 cents is adding to the pain. And I don't believe that is the job of the City Council. And it's certainly, I'm not taking on that obligation. Next. Well, you heard a little bit from Amanda about how she was and her family was struggling on income that's certainly higher than the city's average income and certainly higher than the median. So imagine the impacts that those families are feeling. But what are those families doing? You can see a good list here, and I'm sure that anyone watching this can identify with all of those. Basically, what I read from that is we've exhausted all our options, and now we can't even meet our basic needs. That isn't the kind of city we want to have, and we certainly wouldn't be proud to adopt a budget that makes those situations worse. And that's why I'm proposing a 91-cent real estate tax rate, revenue neutral budget. But what's interesting is both our city employees and our taxpayers are communicating the very same message for the very same reasons. Our citizens want tax relief to help take the edge or mitigate the edge of rising inflation on food and housing and whatnot. And our city employees are wanting a pay raise to also close the gap between what they earn and what they have to pay. And my proposal allows us to do something for both groups. Isn't going to solve the problem, but isn't going to add to it either. Next. Well, these were some of the things that we've all probably read in the paper that the governor is doing. And we can do some light things, but I focused on real estate tax because it's the easiest for people to identify with. But I do want to thank the governor, because we're going to need tax relief at all levels of government to mitigate in a substantial way inflation, because no one level of government or any one family can mitigate all the effects. But I do want to thank the government for his leadership on the behalf of working families, seniors, and businesses. And I believe City Council needs to follow his lead. Next. So what can we do as members of City Council to both address the need for help, as we hear it from taxpayers, and the need for help as expressed by employees? Well, we can do one thing. We cannot pull forward projects that are already fully funded in the prior year CIP and accelerate them and do things and pull them into the most expensive time of construction, which is how many people are modernizing their homes. It isn't some true huge necessity because the cost of materials are high. It doesn't make sense, and it isn't sensible. We could eliminate that $7 million council discretion account in the city manager's recommended budget. I haven't seen this 99-cent budget. No one has. Well, at least I should say no one. I have not seen it. How many families have a $500 contingency account for fuel? Matter of fact, 40% of American families can't come up with $400 cash. That's per the St. Louis Federal Reserve assessment. So I think the city's got a already 9.14 and 1.8 reserve overall. I think we can get by without a $5 million fuel contingency account and do the same thing that families do: make difficult choices in trades, live within your budget. That $5 million is available for tax relief. Also, we always budget for more people than we can actually bring on board and hire. That money needs to be recaptured and goes back into better allocation. And we have to make in this budget, and that's what my budget does, make tax relief, that's that revenue neutral real estate tax rate, and compensation of our workers our co-highest priority. And that is the actions that I make good on both those priorities. Next. Now, some will say, oh, that's not possible. How can we meet the needs of both the city employees and homeowners? So that's what they've told us in the hearing explicitly. I've heard many people who were city employees and also taxpayers who weren't city employees say, you should be taking care of each other and adopt 91 cents, because as a homeowner, I can't afford these taxes even as a city employee. Well, I'm here to tell you it is doable, but there has to be a will for there to be a way. And the way can't be the path of least resistance. Being adopted is the path to your wallet. That is not the correct way. Is making not so difficult choices, certainly less difficult choices than Amanda's family's making, and we can get to 91 cents. Next. I just want to bring this back to a slide I shared earlier, because I just want to remind everyone what those choices are and how the three options stand up through the eyes of working families, seniors, businesses, and city employees. Each of those first two options take what 68.9 on the city manager's recommendation, and under the mayor's $58.9 million get taken out of the private sector economy. That is money that consumers are not going to have to put gas in their tank, food on their table, and keep shelter over their head, and go into many small businesses who depend upon that spending at the home level to stay and survive themselves. Taxes are not free. They deny someone else the business that income represents. You can see the difference. And as the owners of the city and employers of council, once again, you are the judge, and you have to judge which of these options at the top line of real estate tax rate is best for your family. Next. Now, how did I get from the dollar and most extreme case, $1.01 of the city manager's recommendation to 91 cents? That represents having to find $68.9 million of money appropriated for other purposes to be reallocated or offset in order to make that $68.9 million of expense go away and allow us to lower the tax. Well, the first point gets back to one of my earlier things I mentioned. One of the things you don't do when you're having record high inflation and even higher in building materials is accelerate unnecessary capital construction. I mean, that's like a no-brainer, but apparently it's a ill-conceived move because we didn't follow that logic. Because back in February, when we knew we hadn't yet, the budget was only months away, the city council majority, matter of fact, unanimously, except I had to abstain because my wife's a teacher at the time, spent $43.9 million of surplus cash from the prior budget year, last year's budget. It came from overperformance of revenue, under execution of revenue. And rather than holding that until we knew what all the bills were and what tax trade-off thing is, no, they principally appropriated that to spend $3.5 million on AstroTurf for 2 high schools. I know that's the higher priority than people putting food on their table. I'm sure that's all of us would agree how wise that is. Then to 2 schools that were already fully programmed and funded in the CIP adopted in May of 2021, that's the current year, that the school board was more than satisfied with. There was no crisis that, our kids are suffering or working and buildings are going to fall down. No, but because there's cash available, let's give it to us. And we want to accelerate those schools and deliver them earlier. Well, when there's no compelling educational competency gain from acceleration, and there is not one, then I think accelerating capital projects, construction that are, if you stuck with the original schedule, were fully programmed and funded, is an unnecessary move. And it really is kind of insulting to people who are struggling to make a living and put food on their table and whatnot. And that cash should have been used for tax relief, but it wasn't. But in this budget, we can revisit that. That is not a done deal. That money is being put into this year's budget, this year's CIP, for, I should say next year, that enables that acceleration. So we have an opportunity to take into account what's really happening to families, recoup that $43.9 million, pay $28 million towards the bond referendum that makes 4.1 cents go away, and use that cash in the city's budget because the school board's not entitled to it. And that helps a big payment towards reducing that 10.3 cent rate. And you can see the other items here. Under the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, we put another $15 million into parks. So while $1 million for PAYGO for parks would be nice under all circumstances, since we used ARPA money to do $15 million, I think that's a risk we could take in the next year's budget and recoup $1 million. Now, none of you may remember when we still had a Sandbridge TIF that we took anywhere from $5 to $9 million a year out of the Sandbridge TIF. So why is it that the town center TIF, now that it has a 1.7 million surplus, since obviously that's why we created these alleged TIFs, to generate and help us with our taxes in the future. Well, the future's here. They got a $1.7 million surplus. I think providing tax relief to working families and businesses is more important. And just like we did with the Sandbridge TIF, it needs to be harvested. I'm going to talk in the next slide about the $22 million relative to how we budget vacancies. This is a fairly wordy slide, but it's out of necessity because you have to watch the function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause for a little bit and let you read through that slide, and because I think it's fairly self-explanatory how the $22 million was recaptured and contributes to both reducing tax rate and also provides the $11.25 million in additional compensation funding for employees. This is a summary of what I've kind of covered throughout this discussion about how to address the need to help both taxpayers and city employees mitigate the financial pain of the current double-digit inflation and somewhat raises. I identified how I got to the offset. I shared with you how we got the $11.25 million for additional compensation. You can see here the change and how it's pushed up from 32 to $44 million and what I would use that for. I explained how we got the $25 million for flood prevention to defer by 1 year the need to increase the real estate tax. And by doing that, we just continue to build Betty F. Williams approved CIP back in May of 2021. We don't do AstroTurf on 2 high schools. I'm sure that's a sacrifice we all can make. And we defer some accounting and other capital expenses that are certainly risk acceptable in today's double-digit inflation environment. Next. Well, in the end, and I'm not asserting that my path is the only path and it's my way or no way. I'm saying I have established beyond a reasonable doubt that there is a way to get to 91 cents and to adequately compensate our employees, and everyone can be a winner on their needs. But the city cannot be, as an entity, distinct from the people, cannot be a winner on all its wants. That's the difference. But the reconciliation budget is communicated only at the top line by the vice mayor, still calls for an 8.66% increase in the real estate tax rate. It is an unnecessary self-infliction by the city council on families. It's not a necessity. It's a choice they are making. And it's a choice we shouldn't make. We should be more empathetic in both our words and in our deeds. The action you take in support of or in opposition to or neutrality on my Youngkin styled proposed budget is your decision and is reverently respected. As your humble servant who is honored beyond measure just by the opportunity and your consented privilege to serve, I have, to the best of my ability, translated your voice for tax relief and reallocation of revenues to increase compensation for employees into my budget proposal. What happens next is a task for each voter to decide, and the aggregation of the former will influence, possibly, the vote of City Council on May 10th, 2022. And you are in charge of determining the outcome among the candidates in the City Council election in November as to how the vote on the budget influences your vote on the candidates. But my work on the budget is coming to a close. Your work in taking additional risk on your family's needs will just be getting started as the continued inflation for food prices and energy prices is on the horizon, comma, if a majority of council fails to change its course. I appreciate the time you have taken to listen to my view and my reasoning for a 91-cent real estate revenue neutral budget. You certainly are free to text me at 757-636-1534. Again, 757-636-1534. Or send me an email at John, Johnd, as in David, Moss, MOSS, 4109 @gmail.com. Again, John D. Moss, 4109 @gmail.com. Be a note that all emails that I receive are covered by FOIA and are required to be disclosed. To comply with that requirement, I forward all emails that I don't respond to the City Council mail retention, so they're covered there. And when I do reply, the City Council retention system will be a blind copy on any response that I make so that I can fully comply with the FOIA requirements. It's just more than I want. The bandwidth that I can cover is, how many email accounts can be covered. So, and if you send me something to vbgov.com, it's forwarded to my personal account and it's managed there, and it is forwarded back to the city on all replies so I can be in full compliance. I just want the public to know that anything forwarded to me is subject to the public disclosure under the FOIA statute of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Again, thank you for your time. Again, it is truly a pleasure and an honor to be able to serve the public. And it's a job that I enjoy, and I have a passion for public service. And look forward to seeing you out there in the community in my day-to-day walks. Again, thank you very much.